Yes, hello and welcome YouTubers and Doctor Who fanatics to episode 3 of the Ultimate Book Marathon. Now we're going straight back to the Virgin New Adventures with the second release from the range and the second from the Timewyrm series. That being Timewyrm Exodus by Terrance Dicks. Now we're by a book which really should nail a good score. I was predicting that this one would get a 9 out of 10. If it's higher, then, well, even better. I was predicting that this one would be a cracker, and the reasons are pretty obvious why. Yeah, there's quite a few books I was predicting that would get a 9 out of 10 or over in this season of the Ultimate Book Marathon. They were, as predicted, Timewyrm Exodus, Timewyrm Revelation, hopefully Time's Crucible, Cat's Cradle Time's Crucible, because it's the setup to Lone Barrow, Cat's Cradle Warhead, which was my most anticipated book from this entire season, A Nightshade again, because I've already read it and it would definitely not drop its score, Vampire Science maybe, I'm hoping that one, Alien Bodies, because that one seems to get praised left, right and centre, and CNI. Those are the books I was hoping or predicting I would get a 9 out of 10. It's always good to be optimistic. I was hoping for a 9 out of 10 for each of these Doctor Who books, especially this one. And the reason why I was so looking forward to Timewyrm Exodus, because it is the sequel to the War Games. The War Games is my all-time favourite Doctor Who story. I adore it. It's by Terrance Dicks and Malcolm Hulke. It's a perfect 10-part story, and to have a sequel to it is absolutely marvellous. There is another Doctor Who book which I really do need to read, and it's actually this book here, Players, again written by Terrance Dicks. It seems like a lot of the events in this one sort of get referenced and teased in Players, so I think I do need to read this, because if this one really does float my boat, then this one, it should follow the same path. And yeah, it does. I really do want to read this PDA. Not right now because I'm busy with the EDAs and the Virgin New Adventures, so maybe after I give Players a shot. And another reason I wanted it to be good, because Genesis just fallen right on its face. They only scored 22 out of 120, and now the EDAs are definitely in the lead as they have 98 points, and the Virgin New Adventures have 22. So I was hoping that Exodus will deliver a big score to put the Virgin New Adventures in a strong lead. But yeah, I didn't think that this book would fail me, that it wouldn't be underwhelming, it wouldn't disappoint. I was predicting a 9, and the outcome will be that. If it's higher, then even better, but 9 and bang on what I was guessing. So without no further ado, let's go straight into my review of Timewyrm Exodus, written by Terrance Dicks, the second story of the Timewyrm series. I wanted to read this book for absolutely ages. I think I got it around December 2015 in a bundle which I unboxed and did on the channel. It was like a nice Virgin New Adventure bundle when I got it back into the Doctor Who books, because originally I only had 2 Virgin New Adventures, which were Love and War and The Room with No Doors. They were my first Doctor Who Virgin New Adventures, and by 2015 the books appeared here and there really, but they weren't really a main thing. They appeared during 2014, I got some rare entries in them as well, and the same thing during 2015. Maybe not on the scale as they are right now, because I've got a lot more new entries. But anyway, I've wanted to read this for a while to experience it, because I knew it was a sequel to the War Games. I wanted to experience it, and was I disappointed with Timewyrm Exodus? No. I was not disappointed. Come on, I said it was impossible. This delivered for me. This was just absolutely fantastic. 1,000 times better than Timewyrm Genesis. If you want to, you can. You could just skip it. If Timewyrm Genesis just looks so crap to you, and you just don't want to read it, then fine. You can get away with it. If you want to pick up the events, just go on TARDIS Wiki and read like the synopsis of it. and you should get the basic plot line of what Ishtar, or the Timewyrm essentially, did in Timewyrm Genesis, and will lead in fine into Timewyrm Exodus. So if you're doing a marathon, or you want to read the Timewyrm series, but you think Genesis will be a load of crap and you don't want to waste your time with it, then just read a synopsis on the internet and go right for Exodus. You can do that absolutely fine. Yeah, all I wanted from this, for it to be a strong sequel and homage to the war games, but as well have a completely different story, not just, you know, a copy of the war games. Utilize its own elements, maybe utilize elements which were already being used in the war games, but implement them and utilize them in a different way. That's fine. Terrance Dicks does this a lot. He always grabs elements from previous work he's done and expands on them. You can see his books, he does that a lot. Or if it's his collaborator, being Malcolm Hulk, you know, like Catastrophia, you know, it's more expansion to the story. Frontier in Space, this is an expansion to the war games, same with Players. Terrance Dicks loves to expand on his own ideas rather than other people's ideas, I've seen. Yeah, by this one, the arc feels very strong. There are connections and references and flashback into Timewyrm Genesis, there are, so pick them up while reading them on the internet if you don't want to read the book. You know, there is flashbacks and talking about previous events of Timewyrm Genesis. The arc feels strong, it does, and there's definitely some like wow moments which really makes me feel gonna get answered in Timewyrm Apocalypse. Will they be revealed in Timewyrm Revelation, which seems to be the obvious one where all the things are going to be concluding for the Timewyrm series. There's a very strange and creepy part of this book. It's very mysterious and it has a lot of ambiguity around that part. I'll get to it in a little bit in a minute. But definitely feels like it's connecting to Revelation a little bit. Yeah, I think this definitely does tease Revelation very well. A lot of foreshadowing. Yeah, the arc, it works very well, and Terrance Dicks did a wonderful job of referencing back to Genesis and foreshadowing. Very good. The arc feels very good, and if I'm doing an overall rating of the arc, I think Exodus gives it quite a high mark. Yeah, it seems like the arcs are a little bit better in the Virgin New Adventures than the BBC ones. Didn't seem like they really communicated or worked out very well in the BBC EDAs. You know, Lawrence Miles had a bit of a problem with the Faction Paradox arc, inconsistencies were happening, and it all went pear-shaped with interference and the Ancestor Cell, and then the Sabbath arc working into it. It really was difficult to really grab what was going on within the arcs and to get invested with them. The arcs here, I find the Timewyrm series quite investing. I'm intrigued and I cannot wait to get to Revelation. I think Apocalypse looks a bit too much like filler to me. There won't be much reveals and whatnot because there's some big stuff in this one. I think it's foreshadowing definitely Revelation. But yeah, this is pretty much a popular book. A lot of people like this one. It's pretty varied of what is someone's favourite book from the Timewyrm series. It's a little bit mixed. I see a few say Genesis, which is fine. It personally isn't mine, definitely not. Exodus gets a few, well, quite a lot actually. Apocalypse, it seems to be filler, really, so not too much. Actually, not at all, really. And Revelation, it seems to be the high mark, people, and it's the best from the series. A bit like Exodus is definitely second when it comes to someone's favourite. Revelation seems to be first. I personally predicted that Exodus would be my favourite. Now, by sort of thinking about it now, I think Revelation might be number one now. Just to see that it feels just so mysterious now, and the referencing in this is just so fantastic. It's really put Revelation in a fantastic position. So, Exodus has got a big challenge to compare to. What's better, Exodus or Revelation? We're going to find out in the Timewyrm Revelation review. But yeah, with ratings and scores, it usually gets a 7, 8 or 9. It's often around that area for Timewyrm Exodus. Some people go to the 9.5 to the 10 out of 10 area, which is fantastic. But it's usually around the 7, 8 or 9 out of 10 score, which is good. Some people do call it average. Again, when it's a popular book, it always gets that sort of reception sometimes where someone likes to sort of pick at it where others usually don't. It's seen before, like with even alien bodies, for example. And Timewyrm Revelation as well. Yeah, this novel is divided in like 2 major sections. It's like 4 parts there are, but I see it as 2 major sections. And I'll just show you the chapter points now. The first section is 1951 occupation. And this is the what-if story of what if Germany won the World War II. What if they won? Now we see like the Doctor and Ace in London, but under German occupation. You see how the Nazi government work in 1951 London. You know, the Nazis did some quite ruthless things back in the war, and we can see how them transpired if they actually won the war. What would be the story if Germany won? Would there be resistance parties trying to stop this corrupted power? So the first section is the what-if story of what if Germany won the World War. And the second is where, you know, they're trying to prevent this catastrophe, this time catastrophe from happening, because it seems like someone quite calculating is doing these events and causing Germany to actually win the war. So the Doctor has to piece everything together to try and get time, history, back on track again. Yeah, from the beginning we can see that the Timewyrm was beaten during Genesis, and now we can see a different form of the Timewyrm. This is the form of the Timewyrm which I wanted to see. In Genesis, she was alright. You know, she was like this cybernetic goddess, but she didn't really have some terrifying powers or anything like supernatural, and that's what I was hoping. Here it's like a supernatural entity than a physical one. I don't think that fits the Timewyrm a lot better. So yeah, the Doctor is again tracking down the Timewyrm, which lands them in 1951 in London under German occupation. And not only do they have to find and stop the Timewyrm, destroy her, they have to find out what on earth is going on. How has this alternate timeline happened? Someone or something has been manipulating events. It's the Timewyrm, is it someone else? That's where questions start to come in. You know, I just explained the story and it was just so much more fascinating and exciting than boring old Genesis, and the narrative is fantastic. Yeah, it was just such an engrossing, engaging, strong narrative, and brilliant in many areas. And as well, it plays brilliant homage to the war games, and I'm quite surprised some reviewers never state this. I looked at people's reviews and no one states this, but it plays quite nice homage to the war games by referencing it very cleverly with either events or dialogue. Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised people don't talk about it if they don't notice it, or I don't know really. But since I'm such a war games buff, I clearly noticed it. Yeah, Exodus was one of those books which I couldn't put down, and I didn't want to put down. I completed it in 2 sittings, one on one day, one on the other. And when I got halfway through it, of course I took my break. That's enough for a book, I would say, reading half of it. And I sort of wanted to go back to it, I did. If a book does that, then you know it's a good one, absolutely. If you want to go back to it, when you've read a big chunk of it, like half of it, that is a very good thing for a book to have on you. This was a recipe of success. The Timewyrm Genesis was the complete opposite, with terrible sexual references, bad story, terrible dialogue and writing, and littered with errors, and writing for a Doctor which you don't even like. That is a recipe for disaster, that is. But paying homage and respect to the original story, making a sequel, using elements from that story but expanding on them and utilising your own elements with fantastic characterisation. By the way, Genesis is absolutely disgraceful characterisation. I'm going to add that one too for a recipe of disaster for Timewyrm Genesis. And fantastic supporting characters. Recipe for success. There was one thing I was a little bit surprised of, and that was the drive choice it went for. Now you think this one featured in the World War, it'd be very action-packed and epic and whatnot, even though it is epic. Not necessarily action-packed, this one, which I was a little bit surprised. Its main drive was actually 2 drives, actually, I forgot. But it's not action, that's not one of them. It's mystery and political storytelling. And yeah, it had some very fast drive, if I were to change something, no, actually not changed, if I was to add something, I would insert a little bit of action in it, maybe some fighting sequences with guns going off and whatnot. That's what I would have personally had, because there wasn't too much of it, but the main drive was fine. It's just I would add a little bit more to it. But yeah, let's move on to the first part, which is the 1951 German occupation, the what if part, where Germany won the World War. There's one problem, which most books do for people. St. Thespians is definitely one for me. It's a big problem when it comes to Doctor Who books. They take time before they get rolling. One of the biggest complaints and a negative you can give a Doctor Who book, a slow start. That can be awful for Doctor Who books, can't it? Especially if it's in Thespians, because the first 100 pages are a flipping dull read, and it's got padding at the start, which is a suicidal for a Doctor Who book to do. Don't get it with Exodus. Immediately just gets into the story, doesn't faff about. That's one thing I don't like with Doctor Who books. Sometimes it does faff about, they do. If it's like characterization, introducing the characters, they just faff about. Yeah, no, it doesn't faff about. Immediately just starts to drive with mystery. It's engaging. That's how you start off a book, not faffing about. Yeah, I've had this for the Virgin New Adventures quite a lot, where they start out perfectly. And even Genesis, to a certain degree, it started out okay. They've been alright, they have. I've really just only had this issue with the BBC books, not really the Virgin New Adventures, so that's something quite interesting to note. Yeah, Genesis was alright, but it just never got off the ground really after that. And Nightshade is definitely a great example, because it utilises its mystery, does that at the same time when introducing the characters, and a strong threat at the same time. It utilises so much at the beginning. So the drive, the mystery and the atmosphere is so strong from the beginning. That's how you do it. You have to have the drive so strong at the start. It makes the rating of the book so much more higher, and the percentage is higher, but you will complete the book. Yeah, some books don't get rolling to like 30 pages, 50 pages, or even 100 pages, and sometimes never. It's brilliant that Exodus got off the ground right at the start with mystery. The Doctor and Ace have landed in 1951 during occupation in London. They know that something's wrong. The Doctor can sense that there's something wrong, there's something evil at work. This isn't right. London's been taken over by Germany. Something has interfered and manipulated with time, and it has to be stopped. If it's the Timewyrm, if it's something else, that has to be found out. The atmosphere is brilliant as well. We can see that the atmosphere and the surroundings and the setting is really dull and miserable and moody, that all these people are just upset and miserable, that, you know, with all these rules and whatnot, because there's a good scene where Ace says it is a free country to one of the Germans, and he says, no, it's not. It's not a free country. You obey by their rules, and if you don't, you will face the consequences. We can see how the German government work post-war. We can see their corruption. We can see it's not a free country. Follow what they say, or you'll face the consequences. So yeah, brilliant atmosphere, great story, great mystery. If the Timewyrm is a part of it, if it's someone else, brilliant start. You know, the Doctor and Ace have a bit of a discussion of what has caused this, and Ace brings up the point: is it the Timewyrm? Is the Timewyrm responsible for this? And the Doctor, at this point, this happens quite a lot where they keep bringing this discussion up, and the Doctor is a little bit unsure, but at the same time, yeah, there's definitely someone else. This isn't how the Timewyrm works, and the Doctor says in this one, it's not the Timewyrm's style. Her style is creating chaos and destruction in her path, and this is like more planned out, something more calculating of a villain. This seems to be a more calculating villain at work than something deadly and destructive than the Timewyrm. We can see that a tactical and calculating mind is at work here. If the Timewyrm has anything to do with the events of this story, it's for you to find out only. I'm going to give you a little bit, like the main part, but other stuff, I'm not going to say. Because remember, hint hint, it's a sequel to the War Games. Like I said before, it plays fantastic homage to the War Games. If it's references or dialogue, it references it. There's one of them where two people are having a fight, just arguing each other really, and it's like a breakdown with these two people amongst themselves, and they have a BFK badge they do, which stands for British Free Corps. And with the law and like the police force and whatnot, they cannot interfere and to stop this. They do not have that authority to do so, because the British Free Corps, these were a unit type from the SS, which was a Nazi party organisations, and these were hired British prisoners, and they were hired by Nazis. And by law, cannot interfere whatever they do. They can basically do what the hell they want. Yeah, very good research on this. And there's a line where it's just a direct homage and a moment to the War Games, where the Doctor, the 7th Doctor, get his role in a minute of what he does in a section, but he has this like big authority figure of telling off these two people who are amongst themselves. He's pretending to be this big authority figure, and this is definitely a reference to episode 2 of the War Games, where the 2nd Doctor was pretending to be an authority figure when inspecting the prisons. I think that is a reference to that, because he's pretending to be an authority figure, and the dialogue, it feels very much the same with the 7th Doctor and the 2nd Doctor during the prisons when he's inspecting them. There's another time where that happens again, so that's probably a reference to that scene again. And another reference, which is by a character called General Strasser, who says that the Doctor's got a silver tongue. The Warlord said that. Another reference to the dialogue in the War Games. Yeah, it seems like the Doctor is very much determined to find out what's going on in this mystery. The Doctor is fully enthusiastic to stop this threat, stop what's going on. See, very different from the characterization to Nightshade, so I hope something transpires down in like Revelation or Cat's Cradle to get some build up to Nightshade. That was briefly in Genesis a little bit, but I'd like to see a little bit more. They're going to Nightshade very well, because here he's very enthusiastic, but in Nightshade he's just so melancholic and down and depressed. He says he's given up now, he's retiring, he doesn't want to battle evil anymore. I hope something like that happens in Timewyrm series maybe, but I think it more might be in the Cat's Cradle trilogy. I don't know, because I haven't read them. I don't know their content, so I have to find out. I hope so, and they go into Nightshade very well. Because after all, I flippin' do adore Nightshade. Yeah, the Doctor and Ace, they actually see a person who's almost gonna... Well, actually, I believe he's already been killed, and he falls into the river, but the Doctor grabs a badge from his hand, a Nazi official investigator. So now the Doctor, he is now playing the role as a Nazi official investigator to then find out what's happening. And now the Doctor can talk to General Strasser, who's pretending to be a Nazi official, to find out clues and whatnot, to see what's going on and how Germany actually won the World War. My God, the characterization is so much better in this one than Genesis. The 7th Doctor and Ace, they just feel so much more believable as characters now. They interact well, they bounce off each other a lot better, they do. Genesis, you want to gouge your eyes out, really. Because there's one part of Genesis which was so damn horrible, you definitely want to gouge your eyes out. And there's a little bit more to it, but I forgot to bring it up. It was with Ace going with Gilgamesh, and Ace didn't want to. And with Ace fleeing for her life, and she didn't want to go with Gilgamesh because there was the potential that Gilgamesh will rape her, the Doctor says, grow up. So Ace is scared for her life because she doesn't want to be raped by Gilgamesh, and the 7th Doctor says to grow up. Fucking well done, John Peel. You don't get sloppy shit characterization in Exodus like that, where it's just eye-gouging crap. It is. You just don't want to believe it's true, and 7th Doctor fans would be crushed. They would if Timewyrm in Genesis. Here it's just so much more believable. The 7th Doctor is actually characterized very, very well. Definitely feels like the 7th Doctor. I think Terrance Dicks did a fantastic job. And I'm excited to see Paul Cornell's in Revelation, because I believe Paul Cornell's favourite Doctor was the 7th Doctor after all. Or, if not, one of his favourites, like a big fan of the 7th Doctor. Yeah, the supporting characters are brilliant too, like Lieutenant Hemingskull. He's a nasty piece of work, he is. He's a nasty, vicious character. This is where the book has a little bit more gravity to it, and I love it. It's a little bit more bleak, it does, and just gritty. Like, this character's just horrible. He's nasty, he's very sickening, he's quick-tempered, he's brutish. A lot of layers to his character, and you see him go very violent and uses pretty powerful intimidation. And even to Ace, Ace is a little bit scared of Hemmings because he's a bit of an intimidating character and does not mess about. He more believes in drastic measures. You know, she's got bruises all over her face, her nose is bleeding because Hemmings just literally punched the crap out of Ace with the interrogation scene. Yeah, before that, there are some moments where Hemmings is trying to track down the 7th Doctor and Ace. Got some good chase scenes and whatnot. You know, a few action scenes in there with guns going off, but not too much. Again, that's not his main drive. It's mystery and political storytelling. Political storytelling, that more kicks in the second part during 1939. And there's a few chasing scenes and whatnot, but eventually, as I said, the Doctor is hiding his true identity. He's now pretending to be a Nazi official investigator, and interacts with General Strasser, who believes him to be an official Nazi investigator. And now Hemmings cannot interfere and now acts as his assistant because that's an order by the General. If you disobey orders, you'll be punished, you'll get executed, you'll be thrown in prison. But yeah, Lieutenant Hemmings is a nasty, horrible character. He says that he will, of course, obey the General, but behind the scenes, he's spying on the Doctor, listening on his conversations to expose him to be a fake, because he believes him to definitely be a fake and a spy. Lieutenant Hemmings is definitely one of the highlights of Timewyrm Exodus. But another highlight is actually the 7th Doctor himself. The way he is characterized, it does feel like the 7th Doctor. His dialogue, his actions, they just feel like the 7th Doctor, and why I love the 7th Doctor. Feels like he's controlling events and whatnot. He's holding all the aces, keeping an eye on events, keeping an eye on his enemies, such as Lieutenant Hemmings, keeping an eye on him. He feels like he's got control in this part, so absolutely fantastic. Sounds like the 7th Doctor, but a nice flip to it. It feels like the 7th Doctor doesn't really have the control or the aces in his hands during the second part, where it feels like the villains behind the scenes are manipulating events and whatnot and have the power. His dialogue feels right. 7th Doctor brilliantly characterised and written by Terrance Dicks. And yet by that moment, the Doctor does encounter the Timewyrm as a supernatural being. And we see the Timewyrm actually attack the 7th Doctor, going through his mind, and you can see like tables and filing cabinets like flipping over, going crazy. There's this supernatural being around in the Timewyrm. Feels like a powerful entity, and it's nice to see that because we didn't see that in Genesis. It was a physical being as Ishtar, but here it's like a supernatural demon. There's like almost a lot more intimidating than Genesis. Again, another point to it. And yeah, eventually the Doctor does build up enough evidence, and that he's found everything he can during this time zone, and to find more evidence he has to go back before the war started during 1939 to see how the war builds up and who is manipulating events and causing the Germans to win. And yeah, Ace has a nice part to do with this story as well by interacting with the Resistance. So we again can see, and yeah, we can see the Resistance to be quite vicious as well and deadly. They're putting a knife against Ace's throat because they're quite ruthless in their actions as well, because they think Ace is one of those double agents. They portray a lot of double agents, so they're not too sure about Ace's true motives and whatnot, so they're not sure about Ace and they might kill her. So they seem quite interesting. We have some brilliant interactions and character introductions with them, being Popperwell and Ma Baker. Brilliant characters, very ruthless as well. The Doctor eventually sorts out the events with General Strasser as well. I just feel like he owns both sides. He does. He's working something out with Germans, with General Strasser, and the Resistance, helping both out just to find out what's going on. We have some stuff on like Popperwell's character, who was a major, I think was well promoted to like a colonel during the Second World War in the British Army. And Mark Baker as well, who set up the HQ of the Resistance. And yeah, Lieutenant Hemmings' character goes through quite a bit, and then is accused of, betraying orders, not listening and following orders, and he goes to a prison by not following General Strasser's orders. So the Doctor sort of makes a deal with him, but Hemmings doesn't do that, doesn't agree to the Doctor's terms and whatnot, takes his own chances, he leaves, he escapes from prison. There's something very mysterious indeed. Hemmings sees a blue box, a TARDIS, but not the 7th Doctor's TARDIS, but it looks exactly like the Doctor's TARDIS. And he goes into it, makes a very demonic sound, leaves, and Ace witnesses it and tells the Doctor about it. Brief discussion on it, fades away after. What happened to Lieutenant Hemmons? Just went to a TARDIS and vanished. Yeah, I see this probably coming up in Revelation to get concluded and answered. Though I do have a theory of my own, I guess, of how that's possible. Of how there's another TARDIS. I do have a guess. By piecing together the arc so far, I might have the answer, but we'll see if I'm right or not. I'm not going to say it because of spoilers. Yet the first half is fantastic, great characters, great interactions, Seventh Doctor's brilliant, the narrative, the tension, all absolutely fantastic. There is a little section as well before we get into like the second big part. This is like featured in 1923, pre-World War. Got some stuff on Hitler, and this is where we see the Timewyrm is now inside Hitler's mind. This is sometimes where we can see Hitler can act a little bit neurotic and crazy, but it's really the Timewyrm who's doing all that. But that's more seen and expanded on during the second big part, which is featured in 1939. We learn something on the Timewyrm, that she's a part in Hitler's mind, but she can't escape Hitler's mind, and the reason is actually quite interesting and makes sense, so I'll leave that to you actually, of how that's possible. But I quite like the idea why. And we learn something of the Black Coven. It seems like they might be the ones manipulating events and created that what-if timeline. So, very mysterious of who are the Black Coven. Yeah, something's going good in part 3. I personally prefer part 1 more to this part. Sorry, not part 3, part 2. I personally prefer the first part to the second part. I honestly give the first part a 10, and the second part not a 10, but still brilliant. It's just where I seen a little bit of issues with the book. Not big issues, but just a few issues there, but still very strong. Some good things rolling, but the Seventh Doctor seems a little bit unsure and something similar about one of the characters who's dressed in this shadow hooded cloak, trying to like hide his identity because it seems like he's very disfigured and injured, so he hides his appearance because he might unsettle others. But the Doctor finds that there's something a little bit strange about him. Yeah, that was Dr. Felix. We have introductions to the characters, as I said, such as Dr. Felix, a very interesting character. Interesting stuff about his character, he comes across a little bit intimidating sometimes. Still, even though he's crippled and quite disfigured, he's a little bit creepy and a little bit intimidating. But yeah, he doesn't act crazy, but he just has this very calm tone about him, but yet he's intimidating at the same time. Yeah, we got some other characters as well, such as Himmler, Gorins, and you can see they're a little bit unsure about the Doctor this time now. You know, the Doctor was a bit thingy about Dr. Felix, and now these two are a little bit unsure about the Doctor. This doesn't really go anywhere, sadly, but still, I guess the Doctor's like that good of controlling events and whatnot. But they sort of suspect the Doctor to be not who he seems to be, that, you know, Hitler's always quite vulnerable when he's done a speech because he feels like very exhausted and whatnot, quite weak. And that might be something to do a little bit with the Timewyrm, and it'd be a perfect time to kill him, assassinate him, because there's a lot more attempts on Hitler's life. So they're thinking, you know, they know Hitler a lot, they work with him a lot, but they don't know who this Doctor person is. So they sort of suspect it. And now a character called Borman, who's very likeable actually, respects Hitler a lot, and some nice interactions with the Doctor as well. But yeah, Himmler has like quite a major part of the story, which sort of ties into Hitler's part as well, what the actual villains are planning to do. I won't say what it is. You see that Himmler controls a lot, like the troops and whatnot, the SS, setting up Nazi governments and parties. He has a lot of power. Yeah, back to Hitler. When he's talking about ruining the world, taking over countries, invading Poland, he then acts a little bit neurotic. This is the Timewyrm just trying to get out of Hitler's mind. And then Hitler talks about invading galaxies and then the universe, and this is not Hitler talking, this is the Timewyrm talking, trying to escape his body. And then you see Hitler go God mode and use like electric shock and whatnot, and things flying around in the room like desks and filing cabinets again. And another thing as well, this book does have like diary entries and top secret memos and whatnot, so it's a nice little addition. But yeah, there's one brutal moment which I really do like. Again, adds gravity to the story, where a Nazi parade was going on, and of course people were paying respect to the Nazis and saluting the flag, but one person just had his hands in his pocket He's minding his own business, and then they just stared at him. They just stopped the parade. They looked at him, and then beat the crap out of him. You know, the Doctor and Ace witnessed this, and the Doctor says you could have got it far worse. You could have been shot. You could have been kicked to death. You could have been sent to a concentration camp. It could have been far worse for him. To see how brutal and horrible the Nazis are if you're just different. This goes to things like homosexuals, gypsies, trade unions, or even intellectuals. They will clash you with something different, but they make you suffer. Yeah, it's quite nice to see Ace have her independence in this one, as the Doctor's got own things to do, like trying to figure out some of the Timewyrm and Hitler to sort that problem out. But the Doctor was supposed to get a letter, and this was from Dr. Felix, and it was addressed to the Doctor, but Ace opened it anyway because of curiosity, and she decided to go to this address and meet Dr. Felix. And yeah, we have a lovely link to the War Games when Ace goes to this address where she was trying to get hypnotised by glasses. Obvious indication to the War Games and a nod to the Warlords. Yep, of course the Warlords are going to be in it. When that happens, I can just picture the procession music used in the War Games at that part. Yep, it indicates that the Warlords are the ones behind this event and all the Black Coven. This is where the story becomes pretty political now. As you can see, agreements and disagreements and arguing and animosity with the Doctor and Hitler of what's going to go down. And Hitler has faith in the Black Coven because they've been very reliable and helpful. That war will not rage when Hitler's been taking over these countries and whatnot, like Czechoslovakia. He now has power over Austria. The Black Coven has said that a war won't be unleashed, but the Doctor's trying to control the events of how history is supposed to go down, and the World War has to start when Germany invade Poland during September 1st, 1939. And yet the Doctor fixes history, makes it go the right path, and now Hitler's lost faith in the Black Coven because they lied, they were incorrect, but the Doctor was right. So the Doctor's trying to get Hitler's faith away from the Black Coven, whoever they are, which are now the Warlords, but the Doctor doesn't know that yet. It's about 178 pages in when the Warlords are revealed, and we have another character reveal as well. Of course, it's pretty obvious. Again, I did say at the start this review will contain spoiler reveals, just like character reveals. The War Chief. Yep, the War Chief's character was in this, and yet he didn't die in the War Games. He regenerated, but I won't go through the story of his regeneration. I'll leave that to you, because that will spoil an extra bit of the book. See a bit of back history with the War Chief, and he was actually quite of a growing threat, he was, to Barusa, which is pretty crazy because he was gaining so much power in the Time Lord society, but Barusa himself found him a threat, and so he contacted the Celestial Intervention Agency and deal with him and class him for treason. So the War Chief was going to gain so much power, or Magnus for his real name, but he couldn't because of Barusa. He was scared. He knew that Magnus, or the War Chief, was a growing threat because he was gaining so much power in the Time Lord society, and the Time Lords dealt with him, the Celestial Intervention Agency. That's why the War Chief has this horrible respect for the Time Lords and working for the Warlords. He hates the Time Lords because the Time Lords betrayed him. Yeah, I do love that story with the War Chief. I hate the story with the Master being the War Chief. No, I hate that I do, and even Times Champion brings that up. Hate that. Two different people. Love the story in Exodus. Yeah, the War Chief was excellent, and the Warlords are pretty good as well. And we do have the Warlord in this story as well, not the one we saw in the War Games. He was dematerialised from time. But somehow his son is still in existence when the Time Lords did that. Yeah, nothing too much on the Warlords. I would say the Warlords, when they all ended from this story, I would say it's a little bit quick, a little bit rushed in my opinion. It went rather in a flash. They appeared 178 pages, and then I would say they were about in the book for about 40 pages, maybe a little bit less, maybe 40 bang on. Their plan was good and they do feel like very calculated villains, the Warlords, but bit too quick when they were defeated by the 7th Doctor. And the plan with the War Chief as well, by saving the planet, by freeing the Warlords, because their whole planet had this force field around them. The War Chief dealt with that and freed the Warlords. It's like a way of sort of manipulating them, that he never betrayed the warlords. Yeah, the conclusion of the warlords, as I said, a little bit rushed, but still, they were good enough. And then when the warlords have been defeated, then it's dealing with the Timewyrm. There's like this little epic scene at the end, which lasts like 2 pages of confronting the Timewyrm, and a really good moment, which is the coda, which sort of explains what happens to Hemmings, but not giving you all the answers, just a little bit of a tease of a Timewyrm revelation. But one of my favourite parts, really creepy and hammer horror, and it's pretty much the front cover here. There's a scene where Ace is in this dungeon. She can see all these people with hooded cloaks, and then this person, and then this hooded figure with this goat head with a huge dagger holding it right to Ace's neck, and she's just terrified. She is. That's a really powerful scene, which really gives quite a creepy layer to the warlords. That was a really good scene. It was like the beginning of chapter 9. And the front cover depicts it very well. Yeah, very creepy hammer horror scene, I found that. And yet the conclusion is very well, and it also goes over the Doctor. Did he do right? Because, you know, he's made history right again, but still the World War, it was terrible, it was. Millions died, and he was talking to himself, thinking to himself, did he really do the right way? Did he do the right thing? Because still millions died just to make history correct. And he's sort of talking to himself about that. Again, this is leading into Nightshade perfectly. Yeah, had loads of highlights from this, which is Hemmings, 7th Doctor, that scene with chapter 9, which is depicted on the front cover, and the coda. So to the characters with the 7th Doctor, as I said, much better characterization than Genesis. The 7th Doctor's characterization is believable. You see where he's controlling events in part 1, part 3 doing the same, warlords manipulating in the background. And the ending scene of him thinking, did he do the right thing, is a lovely foreshadow to Nightshade. And again, same thing with Ace. A lot of independence she's showing. Pretty brutal scene when she's confronting Hemmings, and as I said, independence by going to the Resistance and trying to act brave when confronting the Black Coven. Another standout character for me was Hemmings. He was just a nasty character, probably the most nastiest character out of all of them, and he wasn't a warlord or anything like that. He's just a terrible, bloodthirsty, probably the best supporting character from this book. He was just one of, even better than the War Chief and the Warlords. He was something stand out. General Strasso was pretty good and did quite a few references and nods to the war games, and with his line, you have a silver ton, Doctor. The War Chief was pretty good, and it was nice. There was some nice information of what his life was like, that he was rising to power very quickly, but Barusa even found him a threat and was scared of him, so he had to deal with him using the Celestial Intervention Agency. The Warlords are very good, very calculated in this story, which the Warlord had a little bit to do, though I found him a little bit underutilised. I didn't find his utilisation very good in this book, a little bit unsatisfactory, which is one of my negatives. Best character, it's tied with the 7th Doctor's characterisation and Lieutenant Hemmings. Because with Hemmings, you just want to hate this character, but he's just so vile and nasty. And yet, it's not the last of Hemmings, because something happened to him in part 1 as I described, and he's in the coda. So his story has not been finished. Now to the rating and the conclusion. Now I'm going to rate this out of 120 points, as you know, with 12 categories. These are the categories now. Story, characters, enjoyment factor, writing / dialogue, drive, pacing, padding, villain / threat / unpredictability, main elements, originality / creativity, and reread. Story gets a 9. Highly enjoyable, much better than Timewyrm Genesis, and a very strong narrative. Characters again gets a 9. Has some standout ones like the 7th Doctor, Ace's independence in this one, Lieutenant Hemmings, a little bit underused with the Warlord, well actually the Warlord's son really. But since the Warlord, Philip Maydock in the War Games was such a great character and a wonderful actor, wish the Warlord in Timewyrm Exodus could have had something more, really. So I think that's a little bit underwhelming. Just the only thing I find underwhelming about Timewyrm Exodus is not utilising the Warlord how he should be. Again, he was flipping marvellous in the war games. 9 out of 10, not perfect. Enjoyment factor, as I said, highly enjoyable. Story's great. Couldn't take my eyes off the book. 9 out of 10. Writing / dialogue, the writing, the narrative, dialogue from the characters, from Hemmings, from the South Doctor, all believable, all fantastic. Perfect score. 10 out of 10. Yeah, that's the first 10 out of 10 I have rated for an individual analysis rating. Drive again was fantastic. As I said, I couldn't take my eyes off it. A little slow during the third part in one area. Just calmed down a little bit, just relaxed a little bit. But still, Drive was brilliant and a 9 out of 10. Pacing was very consistent. 9 out of 10. Padding. There was no padding whatsoever, so he gets a perfect score, 10 out of 10. No padding to be seen. Villain / threat. Hemmings was definitely, he felt like a great threat in this story, very dangerous and nasty, so point for him. The War Chief was very good, had a very soft attitude, but yet he was very intimidating, and good story behind his character, which we got in Exodus, point for that. Warlord's very calculating. Warlord himself said about that, and the Timewyrm feels like the Timewyrm now. 9 out of 10. Would have got a 10 if the Warlord was up with the other villain characters. Twist / unpredictability. The Coda was definitely a great twist. South Doctor reflecting on what he's done with the World War by putting history back together again was a nice twist, because I thought it wasn't going to do it again. Like foreshadow again to Nightshade, so again, brilliant. The character reveal of the War Chief, who he is. I sort of knew who it was anyway, because of TARDIS Wiki, but I would still say it was a marvellous twist anyway. And the thing that happened to Hemmings during part 1, or section 1, 9 out of 10. Main elements, being a war story, political story, great animosity, what if stories, fantastic. Quite bleak and some wonderful atmosphere as well in part 1. And that really creepy scene in the start of chapter 9, which is depicted on the front cover. 10 out of 10 to main elements. Oh, and as well being a homage to the war games, that's an element of it as well. Originality / creativity. Utilising different elements and expanding on its elements in the war games. Sort of changing up the War Chief a little bit. Found that very good. Give it an 8 out of 10 and reread. Definitely read this again. 9 out of 10. So that gives it an in-depth rating of 110 out of 120, which gives it a very strong 9 out of 10. Almost 9.5. I was debating 9.5 with this one. I think I would give it a 9.5 if the Warlord had something more and paid respect to the original Warlord in the war games. If that happened, I would have gone for a 9.5, and then its in-depth rating would probably be 111 out of 120. Well, I went back and gave it a very high 9 out of 10, the highest possible 9 out of 10. It's pretty much 9.5 is here, and Exodus is here, just trying to get it, but no. Not 9.5 material, but it's a very strong 9 out of 10. Timewyrm Exodus was just a marvellous story for me. Played homage to my favourite Doctor Who story of all time, the War Games. The narrative was fantastic. The arc setup here is brilliant, some fantastic foreshadowing to Revelation with that part in section 1 and the coda right at the end, which definitely gave me chills. The Timewyrm feels threatening, the Warlords were calculating. The War Chief's presence was brilliant, has some fantastic mystery and political animosity with the 7th Doctor. Hemmings is just a nasty, disgusting, sickening character. I despise this character, but yet you like him at the same time. We haven't seen the last of him. The 7th Doctor is depicted brilliantly. If you're a 7th Doctor fan, you will like this. He's like controlling events and whatnot. He's trying to be 3 steps ahead of everyone, trying to keep an eye out on events and his enemies like Hemmings, and a very strong 9 out of 10. Highly recommend Timewyrm Exodus. If you are actually reading Timewyrm Genesis, note this, that when you finish that garbage, if you do find it garbage or just average, know this, we've got something good coming after it. At this point in time, It's one of the best books I've ever read. So many positives to it. There is one negative which I do fuss about a little bit with the Warlord, and the Warlords were like finished off pretty abruptly, but besides that, it's a classic. Timewyrm Exodus is a classic. So with Timewyrm Exodus getting 110 and Genesis before getting 22 points, the Virgin New Adventures are now at a total of 132 points. Let's see if Vampire Science take over. It doesn't really need a lot to take over Vampire Science, but that is the problem of Genesis sucking. So I'll see you in the next book review of Vampire Science episode 4 of the Ultimate Book Marathon, and I'll see you in another TG Productions video.